to another episode of the G20 Interfaith Forum podcast. My name is Stuart Bird.
I'm Marianna Richardson.
And we're excited to be here because we get to talk about an awesome event that just happened. It was the G20 Interfaith Forum, our annual forum in Brasilia, Brazil, at the end of August. And so we want to talk about and break down some aspects of that forum.
And it was awesome. It really, really was. As a matter of fact, I wanted to start with kind of giving an overview about how awesome it was. We had 435 participants from 55 different countries. And out of that, it was interesting to see where they came from, what sectors. About 12% were academics, 70% were civil society representatives. Obviously, that was the largest amount. And then 6% were policymakers and 12% were religious leaders. Now, for me, this is really interesting. The civil society representatives, we talk about ourselves being the network of networks. And that's what that civil society representatives were. They were from a variety of NPOs and NGOs from all over the world. We also tried something new. We did try having Zoom, and we had about 228 Zoom attendees from 27 different countries. And we also tried virtual speakers. We had about 15 from 7 different countries. Now, I wanted to ask you, you were very involved in the technology and the part of the forum. How did you think it went?
I think that we were blessed to have so many people watching over Zoom. In order to have everyone, all of these 228 people watch over Zoom every single session took a lot of technological processes and making sure that all the Zooms were set up and that all the technology was right. And so I think because there was just so much going on, we did have some technical difficulties, and that made it difficult for some of the portions. But all of the attendees and everyone watching were great sports, and were able to take and glean things from it despite the technical difficulties.
You know, one thing I do want to mention about that was the power of having all of those people. And when I say 228 virtual attendees, that means individual. Many of them watched multiple sessions. And so, that isn't the count for how many sessions were watched, but that's just the amount of participants. And I was impressed. I was worried because it's the first time we've tried to do something that complicated in terms of technology. But in terms of the Zoom, I thought that was actually very successful in that people from all over the world didn't have to physically be there, that they could watch it in their homes. But the virtual speakers, that sometimes was a little more difficult, making sure that the internet worked where they were, but also the internet worked where we were. And so we definitely had a learning curve, but I think the power of it was this was an amazing international conference. I think it was one of the best in terms of how many countries were there and were able to watch and be a part of this forum. We also had a lot of coverage. So press coverage, we had 33 media outlets that published articles about the event. And then social media, we had 2 amazing people that just kind of went around and did little reels about what was happening. And so on Instagram, we had about 62,000 views during the forum. 72% of those were usually non-followers that normally would not even look at our account. And we basically touched almost 21,000 accounts were reached. In terms of interactions, we had 3,418 interactions, and what that means is people who liked us or who reposted. And then the other thing I wanted to comment on was how many other international organizations also followed us, were there and supportive in terms of social media, in terms of different press releases that they did. It was really wonderful to see, and I did want to do a shout out for Kai Seed, Sadiri, UFU, Religions for Peace, Interfaith Alliance, which was a major supporter, Islamic Relief, and also PARD. So that was just the tip of the iceberg. There were so many people that also did little articles about us on social media that really helped bring out the messages that were taught while we were there.
I think that's the key idea, is that each of these, 3,000 social media accounts that engaged with our content, and almost 62,000 views on our Instagram during the forum. I think it's cool to think about each of those individuals learning something about what was discussed at the forum, and hopefully that motivates them to go forth and use those principles.
The one thing I would also just comment on, having been to multiple of these forums, I would say this one was the most content rich. I mean, there were just so many ideas and action points and different thoughts that came out as we collaborated together and had just rich discussions. And so I just really felt like it wasn't just networking, but it was also really grappling with major issues and trying to figure out solutions.
Yes. In order for this all to come together, and in order for it to all happen, we have so many people to thank. The teams involved, which include especially President Cole Durham, the president of the G20 Interfaith Forum, as well as Rodrigo Vitorino Alves, who served as the president of the organizing committee. And then he also had a team of students who did so much.
Oh, they were incredible.
They were. There were others who were kind of the local organizing committee, such as Raquel Pacheco, Ivo da Silva and his family. There's a whole technology production team kind of based there in Brazil that helped us so much. We have so much to thank for them. Obviously, the international partnership on religion and sustainable development, PARD, who was kind of our partner in organizing this. They did so much. The International Center for Law and Religion Studies here at Brigham Young University came and just really helped. Others, there's too many to name really, but
well, I do want to make a comment about Interfaith Alliance too, because Interfaith Alliance really did come in and help us so much. They have been a partner for now a couple of years, and I just wanted to say thank you to them as well.
Yes.
And Kaiseed also was very much a part, especially helping us with social media and other things.
Yeah. Others include the World Faiths Development Dialogue, as well as the Georgetown University's Berkeley Center. Did so much, and some of the things they did, were behind the scenes, but really helped contribute to the backbone of this forum. So we have so much to thank.
We do. I mean, so many people came together during this event and really helped it happen.
Right. We understand that in this forum there were a lot of calls to action. So it wasn't all just ideas and theoretical, but it was let's make some action happen. One of the calls to action was by Thaisa, who is a young indigenous girl who lives in the Amazon. And she spoke during the opening plenary. And she had courage in calling us all to action basically on behalf of her generation, the rising generation. It really helped us understand that the ideas that were talked about was largely to serve the rising generation and to help them have a world where they can continue to flourish and make a difference.
Well, and I think that's so powerful because as we talk about G20 Interfaith Forum, this is an organization that we want to continue for decades to come. And the only way that is going to happen is by getting the rising generation to understand how important it is in terms of becoming a part of the discussion, but also becoming a part of the organization itself.
Right. Other calls to action include a call from Mary Robinson, the former president of Ireland and the current chair of the Elders. she really focused on the need for action to change direction on climate change. So really change the direction where it's headed and go for more.
And I loved her comment about being an angry grandma about this topic. And I can relate because I'm a grandma too. And she really just said it as it is, that we need to work together and really solve this problem.
Yes. Yeah, I loved her talk and her speech and what she shared about her experience of seeing a big glacier melting and how people were like, isn't it amazing? And it's like, wow, it's kind of sad at the same time.
It's kind of sad, yeah.
And then we also heard from Brazil's Minister of the Environment, Marianna Silva, who spoke to the urgency and spoke of the importance of seeing results in practice as our collective responsibility. So we need to work together. And I also just want to make everyone aware that I am reading and generating a lot of my thoughts from a summary written by Catherine Marshall, Vice President of the G20 Interfaith.
Yeah, Catherine, at the end of our time there, she wrote a wonderful article about reflections and recommendations. The entire article is on our Viewpoints blog, and I would invite everyone to read it. I think that you would really enjoy some of it. We are doing some touch points that she made, but also some of our own ideas and thoughts on the forum after having been there. The next thing, too, when we talk about the G20 context, I think it's important for us to understand and put this, why do we do this? Why do we have this forum? And the main reason why is because of the G20 summit that will be happening in mid-November in Rio. And so realize the purpose of the G20 summit is to endorse agreements between countries that have been negotiated during the year, also to discuss ways to address global challenges. And this is really, that point is really the reason for the forum, is to come up with policy papers, different very practical ideas that can help some of these global challenges. And then the third is to adopt a leaders' declaration that states their commitment as a G20 group, that they will work towards, these things. Now, Brazil has kind of focused on some very main points, things that the Brazil, as being the host country, has decided these are issues that they want to have addressed during the G20 summit. And those three are, first of all, social inclusion and the fight against hunger. Second, energy transitions, specifically dealing with climate change. And then third, sustainable development. Now, these three, the number one that President Lula has really focused on is this idea of food, fighting against hunger. And he has proposed a global alliance against hunger, which really is something that I think is going to be talked a lot about at the summit, and is something that is already starting and really happening. And so as we talk about the G20 context, it is an opportunity to make immediate change. It's an opportunity for leaders of government who have that power to be able to do something that immediately changes the global landscape. Usually that has to do with money. Oftentimes they will deal with tax problems or debt issues or other things that can be done, relatively quickly through law. Other things take time. And oftentimes those are more to do with human interactions, things that need to change in terms of equity, in terms of the problems with human trafficking, a perfect example, the way we treat other people. Those are things that are going to take time and that we need to, as a society, get on board. And so G20 contextually is an opportunity for us to be able to be a part of the conversation. And that's what G20 Interfaith Forum is all about, is to become a part of that very important political conversation. And to be able to say to the G20 leadership, we also have ideas on how to fix these major global problems as people of faith, as people of civil society. And so one of the things too that is very difficult at the G20 summit level is that oftentimes we think so big, we're thinking countries, international, which are really important.
Yeah.
But we also have to think individuals. We have to take it down to the community. We have to take it down to the family. We have to take it down to what happens to the individual in this context. And as we look at it in that way, we also have to help G20 to understand how we can help individuals. And so there is this balance between the big perspective, but also between the individual and how we can help that one person that is in need of food, that one person that is in need of debt relief. And so it's an interesting opportunity to be able to give global policy ideas that do both, that help the big picture, but also help the individual as well.
Yeah. And the interfaith community has a unique perspective on the individual, because a lot of religious institutions, they go down, maybe if they're a global institution, there's kind of the global level. If they're national, there's like kind of a national level. But then it always kind of breaks down to how someone worships or how a community is formed on the individual level, on the local level. And so I think that one of the benefits of this Interfaith Forum is you get these religious leaders coming together talking about, this is how individuals, and this is how this affects individuals, and then you also have experts on some of these policies who can also give their advice. And so it's really just about this communication that needs to happen. Sometimes we live in our own bubbles where we maybe learn something and we know something, but communication needs to happen with someone who can really make a real change in that, or who can provide a different perspective. And so that was a key part of this forum, were people working together. And it's interesting that everyone had thoughts about everything. It's a lot different. I'm currently studying at university, and in my classes, sometimes a professor will say, does anyone have any thoughts or comments? And no one raises their hand, But at the forum,
there's never a problem about that.
oh yeah, no, everyone could say
Everybody
something
has
about
thoughts.
everything if they wanted
Yeah.
to, just because everyone is so experienced and knows so much. And that's why it's important for people to come together and share thoughts. And we've already heard of reports of partnerships happening from this, where they say, I met this organization, they're working on a similar project with different perspectives.
Exactly.
We've linked up, and that's what it's all about.
I do feel that you just hit the nail on the head. I do think that when we talk about why do we do this forum, two reasons. First of all is to talk about policy, but the second reason is connection. That oftentimes these organizations, they need that opportunity to connect with each other so that they can say, look, I have these resources, I'm working in this country, and then another person comes in and, I'm working in that country as well. How can we work together to get some of these major problems taken care of? And
Right.
so it is a powerful opportunity to do that.
It really is. And the main focus, the reason behind doing this is our theme, which is leave no one behind.
And I love that theme. I really do.
Me too. I think that goes back to our idea about worrying about the individual,
Mm-hmm.
making sure that no one is overlooked. And it's kind of the idea that there should be nothing about us without us. So no one that should be involved in these discussions, that's not. Or no one that this is affecting, that's not that's not having a say in this. It's kind of where that comes from.
Well, and the fact that Thaisa was there shows this idea of inclusion. At the very beginning, the opening plenary, and we'll talk about this later in another episode, but I just loved the vision of people from all different faiths sharing their thoughts and their ideas from their faith perspective. And so that was also something that was very much a part of this multi-perspective view of, and yet coming together at the same time. So I love that diversity and the inclusion both being very much a part of this event as well. Well, we talked about thank yous. One big thank you I did want to make was to the Brazilian government. That is one thing that really happened during this time. The Brazilian government was so much a part of this event, but they were also so supportive of the forum, but also many of the things that we are going to be doing in the future with the Brazilian government, and the way that they helped us and supported us and were there talking about their ideas and thoughts. And I do feel that the fact that we had our recommendations very much in tune with what Brazil wants to do out of G20 also helped us to understand each other. So we do have these 5 vital areas. And do you want to talk about those 5 areas, Stuart?
Yes, so as you said, there are 5 focus areas that this forum was centered on, and they can all be found on our website. The five areas, and these 5 areas are ones that you said were promoted by the leaders in the Brazilian government, and they will be ideas on them will be taken to the G20 summit in November. And we will continue to have webinars focused on all 5. But the 5 are number 1, poverty and hunger. Number 2, the aspects of global governance. Number 3, the climate and ecological crisis. Number 4, education for social cohesion and harmony. And number 5, trafficking in persons and modern slavery. And so, just talking about that first one, poverty and hunger. There was a call to be part of the new Alliance Against Hunger. And that resonates with central religious teachings, and it's what you spoke about earlier.
Yeah, President Lula has really been focusing on that a lot, and isn't that wonderful? This has been something that ever since the beginning of mankind, right, that we've been focused on those that are hungry, those that are poor, and how we can help them.
Right. Especially because advocacy and accountability are 2 important faith contributions. That'll help a lot, making sure that action is taken. And it's a part of a lot of the core values of interfaith communities to serve those and feed the hungry. And then other communities efforts such as like soup kitchens and modeling constructive behavior, supporting smallholder agriculture, and other areas of action will be taken for this.
I agree. Now, when we talk about the aspects of global governance, this is a lot about the money part of it. So this is the focus on debt reconstruction, also reforms of global taxation, and also climate finance, which oftentimes we talk about, how are we going to fix the climate problem? And yep, it has to do with money. We have to think, how are we going to pay for the fixes that we need? So we're looking at a strong advocacy for action to hold leaders accountable. And this means, whenever we talk about money, people always get worried. It's all about money. And so we do need to make sure that we have that balance, that we are responsible, but we also need to support vital, life-saving humanitarian actions that need to be focused on some of these global systems for social protection. When we talk about inequities and poverty, which you just discussed, I think that we also realize that all boils down to money. The haves versus the have-nots. So these are constantly at the heart of the G20 mandate to grapple with some of these global challenges. And that all comes down to these aspects of global governance, which is money.
Right. The third focus, the climate and ecological crisis, called us all to action throughout the forum. We had talked about Thaisa, the young girl from the Amazon who she gave a call to help and to take action to preserve the Amazon rainforest, and many others talked about it as well. The Interfaith Rainforest Initiative kind of served as an example of the collaborative and inspirational approaches that we're seeking for. And the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative brings different religious traditions together and includes in integral ways indigenous communities. And so we're grateful for their example, and they kind of served as a model in this conversation at the forum.
This truly was a major theme of the forum. And I think that's been different, in forums before. Climate change hasn't been as strongly focused on, but especially this year in Brazil, that was just a major point that we were constantly looking at. The next one was education for social cohesion and harmony. And, this is religious literacy and aspects of education systems to make sure that we address pluralism, and we make sure that we also allow all people that freedom of belief and also freedom of understanding. And the only way that's going to happen is for education, for people to understand each other. And so 2 inspirational examples that were highlighted during this forum was first the Indonesian cross-cultural religious literacy program that Matthias Ho is doing such a wonderful job there with that. And it focuses on teachers and messages of competencies and respect for other beliefs. The other is the Arigato International's bold, long-standing approach to ethics education. And this is also just kind of a stalwart that has been globally having children really understand and be inspired by the power of ethics. And so these strong models really were highlighted during the forum, and also gave G20 an opportunity to see that it can work, that we do have people that are doing this, and so these same models can be taken throughout the world to be able to think of ways for social cohesion and harmony.
The fifth focus we want to talk about is trafficking in persons and modern slavery, which has been a long-standing area of focus for the G20 Interfaith Forum. And we have a wonderful working group that is focused on that and has done so much to promote kind of the stop to human trafficking on a global level. There was a lot of very specific calls to action, even down to very specific financial numbers of what it would take to kind of lead an effort to stop human trafficking on the global level. And so I'm grateful that there are specific goals and plans in place for that focus.
And G20 Interfaith Forum is saying to the G20 Summit that we're willing to spearhead this, to really be the driving force to stop this. And so the idea is 30 billion by 2030. And that through that money, we would not only through legal ways stop it, but also enable different centers to help people who have been victimized by this to get a new life. And so I'm very excited because this is a very practical but real issue that G20 Interfaith Forum is becoming the leader in, and really saying, look, we can help stop this and make a change.
Yes.
Well, as we look to the next steps, I mean, we've talked a lot. This has just been kind of an overview, and in upcoming episodes, we'll be talking more specifically about each of the sessions. There were about 37 sessions, and so we will be having multiple podcasts in the future about the specific action points and some of the very real takeaways that we had from these. But we do have some other things to look forward to. We have 5 webinars that are going to be based on these 5 focus areas that we just talked about. We also have about 50 interviews that are being edited and published on our YouTube channel that I would encourage and invite all to watch, because I think many of them deal with these really important issues. We also will have 5 shorter videos based on our 5 areas, as well as 1 longer video that's focusing on why religious actors should be a part of G20. And then we have written up a synopsis for each of the sessions that's published on the website. We have a newsletter that just points you to all these different things that you can look at about the forum. And then we do look forward to G20 Social Summit, which will happen literally days before the actual G20 Summit in November. And then we're looking forward to talking more about this. Stuart, I so appreciate your thoughts and feelings. Do you have anything else to say about the forum?
I think it opened my eyes to a lot of issues that I was oblivious to, that I did not know about. And so now I'm interested, as I look back and kind of review the different interviews done and the different sessions recorded and the synopsis. I'm interested to see how it affects my sphere of influence and what I can do to help leave no one behind, as our theme.
Well, and I hope that's a great invitation for all of our listeners, that they will do the same, that they will look and see what those action points, those takeaways are, and how they can put them into their own communities and into their own lives.
Yes.
Well, thank you for this great discussion, and we do encourage our listeners to come back again next time when we talk even more about the forum.
Yes. Thank you for joining us on this episode.
Thank you.
The podcast provides information and discussions on the G20 Interfaith Forum, but the views expressed are those of the individuals involved and not necessarily the official stance of the forum.
The content is for general informational purposes only and should not be considered professional advice or expert recommendations. Listeners should exercise personal responsibility, seek professional guidance, and conduct further research when making decisions based on the podcast.
The information shared may not always reflect the most current developments, and external links or resources are provided for additional information but are not endorsed or controlled by the podcast.
By listening to the podcast, listeners acknowledge and accept these disclaimers. Please be aware that the content of this podcast may be subject to copyright. Unauthorized copy, distribution, and reproduction of any part of the podcast is prohibited.